Let's talk about something that feels a little bit like magic. How in the world do pilots fly these huge airliners through thick clouds, pitch black nights, or raging storms when they literally cannot see a thing? I mean, really think about that. You're miles up in the air, completely surrounded by a gray, soupy fog. You can't see the ground, you can't see the sky. So, are you flying straight? Are you climbing? Descending? Your body's own sense of balance is completely useless up there. It's one of the most fundamental problems in all of aviation. And the answer, for over 100 years now, has been right here. This collection of gauges, what pilots often call the six-pack. Each one of these dials tells a critical part of the story, and together they paint a complete picture of what the plane is doing without ever needing to look out the window. So let's break down how these simple-looking dials work, starting with how a plane literally feels the air around it. To get how these instruments work, you first have to understand how a plane senses its own environment. See, long before any computer gets involved, a plane has to measure the most basic thing there is, the air itself. And it does this using some really elegant, simple physics. It really all boils down to air pressure. You know, air has weight, and that weight changes the higher you go. Air also pushes back when you move through it, and by measuring these tiny, constant changes in pressure, an airplane can figure out its speed and its altitude with incredible accuracy. And this is the gear that does all the work. It's called the pitot-static system. It's actually pretty simple. You've got a pitot tube, that little L-shaped pipe usually sticking out from the wing or the nose, that measures the force of air hitting the plane. And then you have static ports, which are these little flush vents on the side that just measure the ambient air pressure. This simple setup is all you need for 3 of the most important instruments on the panel. So the way this system works is by constantly comparing 2 different kinds of pressure. First, you have static pressure. That's just the weight of the air at whatever altitude you're at. Then there's dynamic pressure, which is the extra force you get from the air ramming into the plane as it flies forward. The airspeed indicator's whole job is to measure the difference between those 2. Now, the altimeter, this thing is just brilliant. Inside, there's this little sealed metal accordion called an aneroid wafer. As the plane climbs and the air pressure outside gets lower, this sealed wafer expands. And as it descends, the higher pressure outside squeezes it. That tiny little motion is then mechanically amplified through a series of gears to move the needles on the dial. It's like a finely tuned clock, just measuring pressure instead of time. But here's the thing. There's this old pilot saying that points out a huge risk. If you're flying from an area of high pressure into an area of low pressure and you forget to adjust your altimeter, the instrument will think you're higher than you actually are. So the dial might look safe, but in reality, you're getting dangerously close to the ground. It's a perfect reminder that these amazing tools still need a sharp pilot watching over them. Okay, so the pitot-static system tells us how high and how fast we're going. But what about our orientation? Are we wings level, pointed up, pointed down? In a cloud, your own senses will lie to you. It's a really dangerous thing called spatial disorientation. And to fight that, we need something that feels like magic. Gyroscope. The science behind it is this incredible principle called rigidity in space. It basically means that once you get something spinning really, really fast, like a top, it wants to stay fixed in its orientation. So inside the instrument, you have this heavy little wheel spinning at thousands of RPMs, and it just holds its position. The airplane is literally banking and pitching around this perfectly stable gyroscope. And that one principle is the powerhouse behind the other 3 gauges in our 6-pack. You have the attitude indicator, which is your artificial horizon. Then there's the heading indicator, which is like a super stable compass. And finally, the turn coordinator, which tells you how fast you're turning. Of all of these, the attitude indicator is, without a doubt, the most important. When it's all white outside the window, this instrument becomes your reality. The blue half is the sky, the brown half is the ground, and that little airplane in the middle, that's you. It gives you an instant, intuitive picture of your bank and pitch. But there's a catch. These wonderfully clever mechanical systems have a weak spot. They rely on these tiny little tubes and ports being open to the air. And if they get clogged up, the instruments don't just stop working, they start to lie. And they lie in really, really confusing ways. It is a truly terrifying thought. A little bit of ice forming at high altitude, or maybe even a wasp building a nest on the ground. That's all it takes to block one of these critical sensors. And when that happens, the pilot is suddenly looking at an instrument panel that is actively trying to trick them. So, let's say the pitot tube gets blocked. It traps the air pressure from that moment inside the system. Now, as the plane climbs, the outside static pressure goes down. The airspeed indicator sees this growing difference between the trapped pressure and the outside pressure, and it wrongly thinks the plane is speeding up. So what does the pilot do? They pull back on the controls to slow down, which only makes the plane climb faster, which makes the airspeed read even higher. It's a vicious, deadly cycle. As bad as that is, a blocked static port is even worse. If that happens, the altimeter just freezes in place. The vertical speed indicator gets stuck at 0, and the airspeed indicator, it starts working backwards. It shows your speed decreasing when you climb and increasing when you descend. It is an absolute nightmare for a pilot flying in the clouds. Now, it's exactly these kinds of potential failures that helped drive one of the biggest changes in aviation history, the move away from mechanical dials and into the digital age. And you can see that evolution right here. On the left, you've got the classic wall of individual mechanical gauges. And on the right, the modern glass cockpit. All of that same information is now integrated onto a few crisp, clean computer screens. The change is incredible, but the physics behind it all is exactly the same. These new displays don't change the laws of physics. They're still getting their information from air pressure sensors and gyros. But instead of using gears and springs, they feed all that raw data into powerful computers that process everything and display it for the pilot in a way that's much clearer and far more reliable. And the heart of the glass cockpit is this, the primary flight display, or PFD. It takes all 6 of those essential instruments we've been talking about and combines them into one seamless display. This means the pilot doesn't have to scan all over the panel. Everything they need is right there, which massively improves their awareness, especially when things get busy. And if you look closely, you can actually see the old 6-pack living on in this new layout. See the vertical tape on the left? That's your new airspeed indicator. The attitude indicator is now front and center, bigger and clearer than ever. The altimeter is that matching tape on the right, and your heading is right down at the bottom. It's all still there, just organized so much better. The real unsung hero of this whole system is a little box called the Air Data Computer. That's the brain of the operation. It takes all the raw pressure readings and the data from modern solid-state attitude sensors, and it translates everything into that clean digital information the pilot sees on the screen. So we've gone from spinning mechanical tops and delicate pressure wafers all the way to solid-state computers and liquid crystal displays. But through it all, the mission has never changed. Give the pilot a clear, trustworthy picture of the world when they can't use their own eyes. It kind of makes you wonder, what's more amazing? The simple, brilliant physics that made it possible in the first place, or the incredibly complex code that makes it all so clear today?